welcome to the Ogden Way podcast, the place where we tell the story about Ogden by telling the stories about Ogden's people. Today, we're switching things up a little bit. My name is Jaynee Nadolski, and I'm actually here to interview the mayor, Ben Nadolski. How you doing?
Doing good.
Today, we're going to talk about some really interesting topics that are much more complex than I think that the headlines lead people to believe. And we haven't talked for a while. Here, we talk occasionally at the house.
Yeah, we talk.
Occasionally.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're busy, I'm busy. March has been crazy. We haven't done this for a while because March Madness is a real thing in our house.
That's right. The March Madness of the Nadolski household is real.
Yeah. How was that week that I was gone for basketball?
It was hectic.
Yeah?
Yeah. We got through it, right?
Yeah.
The girls and I always kind of connect more when you're gone.
Mm-hmm.
We do things like breakfast for dinner, which could be cereal, but
It's often cereal.
It's kind of a fun thing that we do when you're gone. It's like, oh, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard that went well. That's not the story the kids gave me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I believe you.
But they love you still.
Yeah,
They just said it was a lot.
It was a lot.
I think it's a lot.
It's always a lot. It's hard when your teammate's gone and you're solo and everything's challenging, but we got through it and here we are.
Yeah. I slept really well while I was gone. Did you?
Probably not. I don't sleep much, so.
Well, and again, as we're talking about March Madness, I feel like I would be remiss not to talk about Final Four's coming up. And on the women's side, we actually have a female women's basketball player at UCLA from Ogden.
Yep.
Tamia Gardner.
That's right. Who actually babysat our daughters at one point.
Yeah.
Right?
Who I remember looking up, thinking like, you're only 14?
Yeah.
She's amazing. She's playing in the Final Four. We're so thrilled for her. Corey Gardner, Andy Gardner, local Ogden people. We'd love to maybe have that family come and talk, because it is not easy to get to UCLA. It is certainly not easy to get to the Final Four.
Correct.
So I'm very excited about that. So I hope everybody has a chance to tune into the women's. And it'd be awesome to have both Maggie and Tamia, who played together in high school in basketball. So love to have them on. Hopefully they'll come and visit us. So,
one day.
Yeah. So I'm excited to get to be here and switch the roles and kind of put you in the hot seat.
That's the job.
Yeah. So there's been a lot of things happening in Ogden, in Utah, and frankly in the country that have had a lot of people concerned. And, I think as we've talked about it, when we finally have a chance to talk at night after the kids finally go to bed, what's really going on, what's behind all those headlines. And I think one of the biggest things I'd like to talk about is, what's going on with respect to housing in Ogden.
Yep.
And, I'll tune into city council meetings and listen and listen to your responses, listen to the concerns expressed by the citizens, which I'm really grateful that we have that. But sometimes it feels like we're in a zero-sum game. It's either this way or that way, and there's a winner and a loser, and I don't think that's how you can govern.
Yeah.
So talk to me about some of your thoughts with that.
So I don't know what the date was that we kicked off, and you were last in the studio, but obviously there was the March Madness travels and so on between now and then. But also what happened between now and then is a new presidential administration has really kicked off and ramped up, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think the biggest pressure that we feel here is that anyone who reads the news and has an interest in politics, or really even if you don't have an interest in politics, you really can't miss it because it's so constant, are all of the national and world headlines. And so those are obviously driven in Washington, D.C. and around the world. And it's really common that people see the headlines, feel those frustrations, and they express them at a local level. And that's fine. That's what our Constitution protects and allows for. Mm-hmm. The hard thing is that the hard thing, but also the good thing, is that local government is a place where people can feel like they can express their concerns, but also talk to their local official, their elected officials. We are accessible. We're friends. We're neighbors. We're around town, right? We run into people when we go out to lunch and when we go on date night, et cetera, right? And so, date lunch. How's that yesterday? Judge much? No, kidding. Note to self, schedule a date night. Anyway, my point being that national pressures and national politics kind of bleed into local politics, and it doesn't need to. There's a huge difference. We operate in a nonpartisan environment. We're really focused on pragmatic and practical solutions. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, in respect to housing, national decisions and national dynamics and global geopolitics and macroeconomics that are way outside of our control at the local level mm-hmm. are the drivers of housing prices, right? And yes, there are absolutely things that we can do at the local level and at the state level to help kind of curb some of the drastic increases in housing prices. But at best, we can almost only kind of mitigate the cost, because the macroeconomics that drive housing is the cost of supplies for building supplies, right. The costs of labor, right? Supply and demand, broader than just at the city level, in a local, regional level. Mm-hmm. The housing market is driven by the housing prices locally.
Right. Building supplies right now are going to go through the roof.
Correct. And so
that's scary.
Yeah. And the bigger challenge for Ogden is that we don't have a lot of control over supply because we don't have much space to build. Right. So there's this ever-present pressure to provide more opportunity, which we want to do, but there's not a lot of space to do it. Only about 7% of our land is available for development in Ogden. So we're one of Utah's first built-out cities largely. Most of that 7% of land is really set aside for commercial, retail, and industrial uses. And those are places that people have told us overwhelmingly that they don't want us to focus residential development.
Open space, correct? Is that what they're
looking for?
No,
that doesn't include. Yeah, that doesn't include open space. We're not going to touch open space for that. but yeah, that's aside from parks and trails and so on. Thanks for the clarification. Mm-hmm. But that sets us up for, that all of those dynamics combined with the ever-present, everyday, today, right now, mm-hmm. pressures that families are feeling makes for a really challenging environment, mm-hmm. right? And so just last night I was talking to a realtor, and he said, it's really hard to have clients every day that have education, they have great credit scores, they make great livings, right? They have money saved up to put down, and then we run the numbers and they can't qualify for a loan to get a home.
Right. It's there. I mean, there's doctors that I've talked.
And
I've spoken
crazy.
with a doctor who has a child who's a doctor. He's like, can't get a loan.
Right. So in that case, you could have a family with all of those good things in their favor, and they qualify for a loan for about $275,000, but there are no homes available for $275,000. Mm-mm. And so what is a family to do, right? And what about all the families that are not that fortunate to be in that position? Mm-hmm. And that casts the circumstance for the everyday people here in our community and in every community across the country. I don't know of any cities out there that have a silver bullet Mm-mm. that resolves all of these problems because of all the issues I just talked about. So what I like to focus on, and I want to talk a little bit about now, is that it's not just the cost of housing, which we don't have a lot of control over, but what about the cost of utilities? What about the cost of transportation, mm-hmm. taxes, right? Energy. Those are the things that we do have more local control over, and what we call the household costs. So there's the cost of housing, and then there's the cost of household.
Feeding your household.
Right.
Yeah.
Groceries, etc. And then what about household income? What can we do to improve household income? Mm-hmm. And that is the thing that we probably have the most potential to improve for people, mm-hmm. especially through our partnerships with the school districts, the trade schools, the university, right? And so how do we help our people up-learn so that they can up-earn mm-hmm. and therefore rise above these everyday costs that are crushing families? Right.
So do you have it kind of requires you to be an expert. And I don't want this to sound the wrong way. You're not an expert in housing, but you've got to have a team. That sounds terrible, but I mean, you've got a whole city to run on top of everything. So mm-hmm. how do you create a plan that addresses these issues that you've just spoken about? I mean, in addition to everything else, I think that's a lot of people want to know, what is the government, Ogden City, doing to help
Sure.
us with this.
Yeah. Well, thanks for reminding me what you think of me as an expert. No, just kidding. It's
We could go deeper.
It's actually one of the fun parts about the job for me is you have to become pretty freaking expert pretty freaking quick on a lot of things, right? But I also hire experts, legitimate experts that help advise me
Right.
on these things. And I've got a housing guy, Jeremy Smith, that's incredible. That's his focus, and we talk often about these things. When you talk about coming up with a plan for Ogden, a plan for Ogden, because we're a built-out environment, looks totally different than a plan for Plain City, for example. That's an area where they have tons of space to build. They need to be looking at their zoning and down zoning and how much density that they can afford and what they want to be as a community, et cetera. Whereas we're already in that position. We've already done the density. There's areas where we have little flag lots that are available for minor infill for homes. And we want to make sure that those are available for ownership, not necessarily for rent. So before you come up with a plan, you have to look at what is our environment, what are our circumstances. If you look at the housing stock in Ogden, we have an overwhelming majority of what already meet the definition of a first-time home. We have small bungalows, older historic homes that are on smaller lots that already have the density that most of the state is trying to achieve, right? But they're all a lot of them are some of them are in disrepair or in challenging conditions. And many of them, too many of them, for a community of our type and our size, are in rental status.
Right.
So we've got across the city, about 40% of our city is largely corporate owned and rented to families. Instead of, and we have even areas of our city that are around 60% rental versus 40% ownership opportunity. And that is a destabilizing dynamic, but also cuts into the supply and the opportunity for people to own.
Right.
Right.
Which was, sold to everybody as the American dream.
Correct. Right.
Own your own home.
So we live, obviously being corporate owned like that, we live in an environment where real estate and housing has become a tool for investing and for long-term investment for people and for large corporations. And so we're not the only community that has this, but our approach needs to focus on working with the natural market forces to find opportunities where those rentals come up for sale and then work as a community to purchase them. While we have them in our hands, there's a tool called deed restrictions. These are things that cannot be done compulsory. They have to be done voluntarily. If we or if a partner that works with us or someone in the community has ownership of it in the short term, they can voluntarily deed restrict it, meaning it requires, and it carries with the deed of record with the home and the property, that it be set aside for home ownership in the future. And so that's an important tool moving forward that we use at the city, but also we want to upscale through partnerships and through the private market moving forward to make sure that we're starting to transition out of that imbalance of rental versus owner. And then the biggest component of rental is that we've got too many apartments. So when I took office, we have a backlog of 2,000 to 3,000 apartment units that were already approved and entitled before I took office, meaning they have all of the legal rights to build those out. And so today, you're still seeing new apartments being built. There's an article in the paper the other day, front page, new apartments up on the north end of town. Those were pre-approved and entitled, ready to go. It just takes time for them to be built, and they're starting to be built now. But what people don't know is that early in my tenure, we put an ordinance in place to gain some control over the proliferation of apartments throughout the city.
I did. I remember that.
Do you?
I do.
Okay, so
I pay attention.
right, but that doesn't undo the backlog.
Correct.
It just
Future.
gains some control over the future, right? And what we were able to do is, if apartments are going to be built, they have to be built in the downtown. But anyway, we're still in a position where we're seeing more further of the imbalance on the apartments until we get really more focused on the ownership of the single family.
How's that piece of the plan coming along?
The single family?
Yeah. How have you seen improvement in that in the last, year?
Yeah, but it's not keeping pace when you have a multifamily apartment complex that has hundreds of units.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know how long it takes to do that through a single family twosie at a time?
Mm-hmm.
That's the problem with that dynamic.
Do you foresee with the fact that the building materials for these apartments are going to be so expensive, do you think that builders will continue to just sit back and wait, or will they potentially say it's just not even worth it? I mean, do you see? There's been conversation about that.
Yeah, there has been some of that.
Mm-hmm.
So from a developer standpoint and from the private market standpoint, builders have really struggled to make projects pencil, like make
right.
financial sense without some sort of subsidy. And so the subsidies have been coming from a federal LIHTC credit, it's a low income tax credit that applies to housing, and it's created to ensure that lower income people can qualify for safe and stable housing.
Right.
And that credit has been supercharged for the last handful of years, and cities across the country, especially across Utah, have seen a proliferation of that single housing type because it's the only thing in the presence of the cost of supplies and labor. It's the only thing that has made a project pencil.
Right.
And so that's how that imbalance happens so quickly. Mm-hmm. And in our case, we became subject to it because our land use ordinances were so far out of date. Right?
Yeah, I listened to at the last city council meeting, and you talked about the work that's being done.
Yes.
To update all of that. That's a heavy lift.
That one was related to the sexually oriented business on Harrison, which, again,
we drive
because
by every day.
It sucks, but because we're so far out of date, these kinds of things keep happening. And so when early in my tenure, again, we kicked off what's called a general plan update. It's an enormous multi-generational process to get our land use where it needs to be so that we're built out the way we want to be. And that this pattern of building apartments anywhere and everywhere that there's an opportunity and the cheapest and lowest hanging fruit for the developer no longer happens.
And the reason Ogden was doing that years, prior to your administration, was what was the reasoning behind allowing that type of proliferation? Was it just because we had the space available, we needed housing, or?
I don't think there was a good reason for it. I think it was just lack of control. So until we put our ordinance in place that focused and put some control over apartments in commercial areas outside of the downtown,
right.
It just continued to proliferate, especially when those tax credits were proliferating as well.
Right.
There has been a slowdown in the tax credits. That's been helpful. They're also starting to be distributed in other areas in rural parts of Utah, which has been helpful. I mean, there are real needs for those kinds of things, those projects, right? I'm not demonizing them. But when you have an absolute imbalance of anything, when you have, even if it's only single family in one community, that's an imbalance. Right?
Right.
But also, if you only have deeply subsidized housing in one community, that's also imbalance, and neither are healthy.
Right.
So...
Well, that's I know that that's going to continue to be an issue. I know that you said that you went on a I don't know what you called it. I'll call it a field trip out to, was it Daybreak?
Yeah.
How was that? That's a pretty new community, and it's
huge.
You came home mind blown that day, I remember.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we do as mayors around the state and around the country, I hope, is we talk to each other. We learn lessons from each other's experiences, and it's important to me that, like, South Jordan as a community, and Mayor Ramsey's an awesome lady. Like, we get along awesome, but that's a completely different community compared to Ogden. And so, like, you might ask the question, well, why would you go to South Jordan if it's so different from Ogden? And to me, it's super important to see that total juxtaposition, right? Daybreak's such a big development. If I remember right, I think she said that they're going to increase their population of their city by 1/3 in that single development alone. I mean, it's enormous, and the growth is explosive, which 100% comes with a completely different set of challenges that we talked about,
right? With
infrastructure and providing services out that far and having that kind of growth happen that quickly. Those are different challenges than we have. But that's a perfect example of building your way out of the housing supply crunch.
Mm-hmm.
They've got so much space still
Right.
that we don't have. We just don't have it here.
Right.
The space we used to have are now neighboring cities.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And they've got more room in the neighboring cities than we do. Mm-hmm. And so we're kind of reliant on our friends and our partners in neighboring cities to build supply as well.
Yeah.
Because remember that the regional supply and demand in the housing market is broader than just Ogden.
Yeah.
Right? It's a ever-changing, fluid thing.
Mm-hmm.
So so that's where I work with Weber Area Council of Governments and our neighboring mayors to try and increase supply around us because it takes pressure off of us.
Right.
Here
It takes
locally.
pressure off of the services that we need
Correct.
to provide, and therefore the taxes that we have to levy on the citizens. Right.
Right.
To provide for
Right.
that. So let's talk about one of the most controversial things. I know you probably are thrilled to hear about this, but let's talk a little bit about the situation that Ogden City ran into with the Aspen House.
Sure. So that was a proposal in our downtown, in our East Central neighborhood, to have deeply subsidized and homeless housing in our neighborhood. It's a neighborhood that already has the highest concentration of poverty in our city. And just as a rule and a principle, and this is a lesson learned throughout housing policies and practices for generations now, and even federal housing policy is even rooted in this principle, is that we shouldn't concentrate poverty. We also shouldn't concentrate wealth.
Or services?
Well, when you concentrate services, it does have a tendency to concentrate poverty,
Right.
which then has a tendency to drive out any kind of wealth, which then creates the donut hole, which Ogden has been for a long, long time in our downtown. So we've been fighting that pressure for the last couple decades that we're changing, right? But the goal for us is to not concentrate wealth or poverty anywhere in our city, to make sure that we are all living with one another across the socioeconomic spectrum, right? When you're struggling economically, the principles say, and the lessons learned through years and years of projects and policies, is that when you're struggling financially, you have to have access to economy and be near others who are creating that economy. And so if you have this mix, generally, it's just big picture, of people that span that socioeconomic ladder, you provide immediate access and opportunity to economic upward mobility, right?
You're correct.
And so that's what we're trying to create in Ogden, is this tapestry of mix. And that when other organizations, in this case the Weber Housing Authority, are concentrating a project in the area of the highest concentration of poverty already, it goes totally contrary to that approach.
Right.
And the system is set up in a way, unfortunately, that really continues to pound the pressures on the Ogdens of the world.
Right.
And I think that is unethical and unfair.
Right.
And so in statute, it's set up to have a city housing authority, the Ogden Housing Authority, which we work with all the time, to develop projects, to locate them in appropriate areas, to manage them in appropriate ways, to keep neighbors safe and our community safe, et cetera, while providing opportunities for housing and stable upward mobility opportunities, right? And access to services, et cetera. While having a county housing authority that would work on the same thing at a more broad county level,
Right.
so that people are not concentrated anywhere, that everybody is doing their part to help lift people and provide opportunities for people. But in our case, we've had a history of having two housing authorities doing work in the same place. And that just doubles, one, that's redundant services and government waste, but two, it doubles the pressures, doubles the impact, and doubles, frankly, the unfairness, not just here in Ogden, but if it's happening elsewhere. Those are the kinds of systemic structural things that hold people down.
Yeah. Well, and as the Weber Housing Authority, are they starting to move to more of, because you said they've dedicated a lot of their focus has been in Ogden, probably for things we discussed, but are they starting to look wider to the wider Weber County area?
Yes.
Okay, good.
I mean, frankly, we need Weber Housing Authority as
Right.
a key partner.
Right.
I don't want to alienate them in this conversation. I want to say
Right.
like that is a critically important role and service.
Should always be partners with the county and their
100%,
arms.
100%.
Absolutely.
But we both found ourselves in a really terrible position, and I didn't envy their position or ours. And so we kind of had to put our foot down and say, we are going to change this policy and this approach moving forward. Thankfully, there's a statute. There's a little known, and we didn't even know about it, rule and statute that it was in a definition section of the Housing Authority statute that said that a county housing authority is required to get, in our case, city council approval before they can do a project. And they had already purchased the property in what would arguably be the worst location possible for us, given our policies and our approach. And it made for a really explosive dynamic.
Yeah, it was explosive. It was really hard to watch because, again, we talked about the zero-sum game, right? Like, if this side wins, this side loses, right? And I think you put it really well that said there's no winners in this.
There wasn't.
Yeah. And I feel like, did you understand where the those who were in favor of the project were coming from?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely. In fact,
outside of the housing authority, I mean like the citizens in the neighborhood.
I totally empathize with where the housing authority was coming from, where the people that were supportive of the project, like to think that I didn't lose sleep over that project would be right. I toss and turn over it constantly.
Yeah.
Because there's real lives and real people at stake in this one decision. But as the mayor, I also have to have an immediate urgency to the day-to-day while also having a mindset and a perspective of the bigger picture. That's a challenging thing to do, especially when you're forced with overwhelming pressures on the day-to-day.
Yeah.
But at the same time that we were considering that project, we had already been working with the Ogden Housing Authority. We cut the ribbon and announced 56 or 58,
It was 58
units through the Solace project that achieves the same thing, but is in an area that can accommodate it, that is providing for the services, that isn't contrary to our housing policies. And so I want to make sure moving forward that we are working with the Weber Housing Authority as a partner to make sure that they're doing projects outside of Ogden while we are doing complementary projects in Ogden.
Right.
And that's the kind of environment we need to create.
Right.
I've been reflecting on, we talked about the national politics and the Washington, D.C., et cetera, kind of raining down on local. That has caused so much unrest and uncertainty for so many people.
Yeah.
And then you put a project like that on top of it. And I think about my friends and neighbors that were so opposed to me. Right? Like during that
was fun.
During that one project, right?
One project.
It comes with the job. So I got to harden up, right? But if you really unpack it outside of this immediate urgency, we really should be on the same side.
Right.
Like, why wouldn't they be with me on helping to push back against what is, to me, a systemic classism that is forcing poverty and, honestly, creating a future and ensuring a future of poverty for people that shouldn't have to, Right. I think it's unfair. The system is wired against them and therefore against us and our people.
Yeah.
And I am going to stand for them,
right,
for us, for Ogden. And I just, knowing the people that were against me in that, I know that I just feel like they would want to stand against that too.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. I think sometimes we don't, as we've kind of talked about, we don't get beyond the headlines. And I think a lot of people are, and maybe I'm simplifying it. I definitely am simplifying it. But there's a lot of, as you've said, rage and anger with what's going on nationally in D.C. And again, people want to do something and want to take a stand, and they do end up taking it on local government, right?
Sure.
And I think when you were running, you said something like politics and being a politician should be noble, but that is not how it is viewed.
Oh, yeah.
And so you've always got a target on your back. And so I think sometimes we don't look beyond the headlines. And I'll give you an example. The union busting legislation that the state just did.
Oh, man.
I remember the name of it.
Yeah.
But, my mom was a teacher. And my sister's a teacher. And I could not do what teachers do. I am not well enough informed about the union busting legislation. But I knew somebody in the state legislature, and I called her. I said, I need to understand this better. Explain this to me. and doing so with an open mind. And then what she was able to share with me, I'm like, that's not what we're seeing in the headlines at all, because that is not what sells.
That's right.
And that is not what gets people's ire up.
Right.
And that gets people to mobilize, right? And so I've found that, and maybe I'm just maturing. That's a scary thing. But to kind of go on like, okay, well, what is actually, and I had my degree was in public relations, so I understand spin. And I also wrote for a long time. And so I understand that that's what sells. But just asking the question and coming at it with an open mind and an open heart, I wish more people would do that.
Yeah. I mean, that's what we lack in the world, is our attention is focused on these, I don't know how many
Negativity.
I don't know how many characters Twitter or X or whatever it's called now.
I don't think that's a rule anymore. Yeah.
I don't drive our social media here. But like, these things are harder than a headline will lead you to believe. But also, I just had this conversation yesterday with someone that works for us that has a past experience in journalism, and she said they'll drive up to Ogden when there's a community at odds.
Oh, absolutely. That's what sells.
Mm-hmm, that's what sells. But when there's but when there's good things happening or positive things, community building things, they're like, I'm not going to drive up to Ogden.
Good there. Yeah.
Because it doesn't get the clicks, right?
Right.
And that's driving divisiveness nationwide.
Mm-hmm. Well, and often it's easier just to read the headline and read what oftentimes is a one-sided narrative.
Sure. Depending on the source, right?
Depending on the source. And then rather than doing a little bit digging about like what really is the issue here and what's both sides of it, trying to understand both sides of it, it's easier to call people names.
Right.
And say, he's a terrible person, and he hates the homeless. He hates the addict. Like it's really surprising to me how that narrative will so quickly gain momentum.
Correct.
But at the same time, it's not surprising.
But it happens. But let's take the Aspen project. The opinion of those that were opposed to what I was basically saying, we're not going to do this anymore. Mm-hmm. This project, and we purchased the property to make the housing authority whole, so that they can take their funds and go outside of the city and do the work that we need them to do as a partner. That's the big picture, longer term move and need, right? And I think most people understand that.
Yeah.
But the opinion and the position of, quote, the other side has credibility.
Yeah.
Like, I get it. And in a lot of ways, I understand and I agree. But as the mayor, I just have to come from a different position for our city, for everyone.
Right.
So I remember a reporter asking me this question, and of course, she didn't write about it.
No.
You do an interview for 15, 20, 30 minutes, and then you get a couple lines, right? But she said, don't you feel an obligation to the people that are affected by this project? I said, of course I do. Right? Of course I do. I'm a human.
Human being.
I do have a heart, right?
Despite what Facebook says.
Yeah. And I said, but I also have an obligation to everyone else in that neighborhood, including the students in the school nearby. And sometimes in this job, you have to make unpopular recommendations and decisions. It is what it is.
Yeah.
But what's important for our community is that we don't demonize each other. Like, I'm not going to demonize the people that had the other, an alternative opinion on this. I'm not going to do it. And I ask that they don't do it to me, but that's not in my control.
Right.
It's up to others, right?
Yeah.
But if we are going to be a community, it's okay to take a position. It's
right.
okay to disagree.
Absolutely.
It's not okay to demonize each other, to vilify one another, and to think that it is that's okay, because it creates this dynamic of good versus evil.
Right, and I want to be clear that it's not just one political party that's doing the demonizing of the other. It's happening on both sides. I've seen it in the last few weeks.
It's how we're set up.
It's just it's stomach churning, really.
Yeah, it's this us against them, good,
help.
evil,
yeah.
push-pull. It's just not healthy for a community, right? And so housing has become the topic of the freaking decade.
Right.
It will be for quite some time.
Yeah, I'm really curious because I don't know the history of it, but like, has this ever happened before? Like, have we, as in America, gone through something like that? Because I think everybody's kind of saying that a big recession is coming, right?
Well, they're starting to be more and more concerned about that,
More concerned about it. So has I guess housing hasn't been as critical as it is currently because, we're, as you've said, built out.
Yeah.
And
we've seen parallels in the past, especially around like pressures with inflation and lending rates. But I don't think we've seen this kind of pressure of all of those forces coming together in the past. So we are definitely in a critical time in history. But you asked a question earlier, what are we going to do about it? And I need to make the point that we can't just do one thing. We have to do a whole series of things. And it's important that they all build on each other. And so you'll see soon we'll be proposing how we want to use our federal funds from housing and urban development.
Yeah.
We are an entitlement community. We get community development block grants every year. We are going to propose to the city council on how to use those funds. I want to use them in a way that positions us and leverages us for other programs that are complementary to scale up. If you look at just that program alone, you're going to say that's inadequate. But if you understand that it's only one piece of the broader solution, then it looks a lot more complete. So in the last legislative session, we worked with the legislature on two things. One, we are a legacy city, meaning we have legacy housing stock throughout our community. That's the properties that we need to focus on that are largely in corporate rental and flip them into family assets. That needs to happen as much as possible, and we need to find ways to work within the market forces to make that happen. And the legislature enabled us to be able to tap into a $10 million line of credit, essentially, and that we can partner with nonprofits or private entities, whoever, and we'll do a public process for how we do it. But they're looking to us as the primary legacy city of the state to build out that approach using our current approach that we use with federal funds as the start and the seed, that we can take that approach and scale it up many, many times over to transition that as fast as possible. And we're gonna build out that program in the coming months. Yeah. And so we'll be proposing our federal piece right now. It's going to fit and dovetail within a bigger piece that we use with the state's help. But another thing that they did was developers talk about those apartments again. They largely build apartments because the laws are set up to where condominiums are impossible. Condominiums meaning that each individual unit is platted separately and available for ownership, purchase within a multi-family density project. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So what could we do in our downtown in a single project that's condominiumized that gives families an opportunity to purchase something for ownership and therefore start to build equity the way we were able to in a starter home? Yep. Well, the starter home dynamic is changing dramatically because of these macroeconomics. So if we were able to build, for example, instead of an apartment project, a condominiumized project in our downtown and take hundreds of owner-occupied opportunities, do you know how much pressure that would take off the supply and demand locally? Yeah. Like what if there was 200 or 300 units available for purchase? That's 200 or 300 people that are looking for a single-family home right now. If they want to live in a downtown environment that's connected with active transportation, public transit, nearby to downtown amenities and retail and restaurants and entertainment, right? There are a lot of people that want that lifestyle. And if you do, the state has made it easier for developers to do that with help from cities as well. Yeah. Our role is land use. And the developer's role is making it pencil. And the state has stepped in and said, we're going to take away the risk of litigation that often comes with condominiumized projects. It's another reason developers don't build them, is they get sued immediately for a number of different reasons. So the state has stepped in and said, we're going to change the rules to reduce that litigious environment. And they're going to make some money available at a really low rate to help make those projects pencil for a developer to build, to then deliver needs for Utah families. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I love I feel like there's an energy in the city right now. And I try not to get too involved because I know sometimes you don't want to come home and relive everything, right? So
correct.
We try not to get too in depth, and that's why I end up watching city council. But I think one of the things that Ogden, and you've done a really good job, and I hope we continue to do this, is look for these ways to help all of our citizens, but also keeping our identity and our rich cultural, I guess cultural identity as well, and history, and really making sure that Ogden stays true to who Ogden is.
That's right. And the best way to do that is to build the people we have. So this is an enormous priority for me. This reflects back to before I even decided to run. When I thought about running, I thought, like, will this square with my conscience, what we're going to do? And the only way that it would square with my conscience is if we focused on building the people we have,
Right.
helping them in their path toward upward mobility, right? Yeah. And I don't want our work to be seen as we're going to replace the people we have,
Right.
so that we have richer people. That is not what we're after.
That's not who we are.
No, that's not who we are. That is exactly how we lose our identity and our character as a community.
Yeah.
But I do want to help the people we have, and that's why I'm here, to step into their greatness, right? Their own greatness, whatever theirs is. We all have a different definition, a different plan for ourselves. And that's why we talk about the Ogden Way, having accountability for ourselves and doing the work to be your best, right? It starts with me, and it always ends with us, right? That's what we should all be thinking about. It starts with you, ends with us.
Right.
And if we all take that approach and help one another, especially ourselves, to up-learn, to up-earn, etc., you can step into these opportunities and live a better life here in Ogden.
Yeah.
And it's incumbent on us as government to not be in the way of that, and to create an environment for people to have access to the opportunities to level up in life.
Right.
Housing is huge in that. And we need to make sure that our people are having access to educational opportunities, trade certifications through workforce development initiatives with partners. And again, that's the essence of the Ogden Way framework. What are we all doing across the 7 pillars of human success together and collaboratively, and synchronized in a way that creates pipelines for people to go level up, right? That's not gentrification. That is leveling up.
It's lifting as you rise.
It's lifting, exactly.
And as Ogden continues to rise, and I do believe it is, I think our entire community will be lifted up. And so I've really appreciated getting to flip the script with you a little bit, kind of put you on the hot seat. Is there anything else you want to
No, I think
close with?
it's kind of interesting because we don't talk like this at home.
No.
Actually,
I'll ask you some questions, but then I'm like, he's...
I know, but sometimes I'm so wiped out. I'm like, I don't know, call Cindy. Like, Cindy will explain what's going on. So, but there's more still. Like, we're just getting started. And that's why we have this kind of longer form forum, is to have these kinds of conversations that I think every community needs to be having.
Yeah.
And you're starting to see across the country, and you saw it in the presidential cycle, that people are relying less and less on traditional media because they don't feel like they're getting the whole story. Right.
And then that's a good thing, and also it has some really big drawbacks as well. In
terms
of building. So I hope that this particular this podcast where I got to put him in the hot seat, I hope that helps us look beyond the headlines and what can you as a citizen do to figure out exactly what's going on. Who can you reach out to? How can you get the information? And how can you help build Ogden into an Ogden that we can all continue to be proud of. So, I guess the call to action for this. Do you want to take a swing at that?
You're the host. It's on you.
I'm almost done. Well, I would say, obviously you've already watched this, so like, subscribe, share with your friends, and visit the websites. Come to a city council meeting and ask the questions you have.
And I would say if you know somebody that's trying to level up, what can you do to help your friends and your neighbors rise? We lift Ogden by helping one another rise up, right?
Yep.
And we need more and more of that mentality because times are hard. So what can we do to harden up for ourselves, with each other, for each other? We are Ogden. We don't have to be Washington, D.C. We don't have to fall to the dynamics that are coming out of that place. That's the swamp for a reason, right?
Let's also try to assume the best out of everybody. Like assume that we're trying to do the right thing on both sides.
Right.
On both sides of whatever issue it is.
And hold us accountable for decisions. I'm fine with that.
I hold them accountable all the time.
Let's just disagree, and we don't need to demonize and vilify each other, right? I'm committed to that.
Yep. And I think that Ogden can do that. So, well, thank you for letting me be the guest host.
Oh, no, thanks for interviewing me. We'll have you back soon again.
Oh, sure. Well, hopefully we can get Tamia and maybe Maggie.
Yeah, that'll be a
That'd
little
be
while. She's
really cool.
Tamia is
She's
kind
a
of
little busy this
little busy,
weekend.
but watch the Final Four. That's another call to action. Watch the Final Four. Cheer on Tamia Gardner for UCLA.
Yeah.
In doing so, you're cheering on Ogden.
Yes, you are.
One of our own.
All right.
Thanks, babe.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.